The Process Podcast, breaking down the daily habits, processes, and tools of high achievers. Now, here's your host, Brad Wilson.
Hey there, boys and girls. This is Brad Wilson with the Process Podcast. My guest on today's show is Barb Schmidt. Barb is quite simply a powerhouse. Her business career started at just age 14 in a pretty unlikely way. She got a job at McDonald's. Through hard work and force of will, she eventually accumulated 6 franchises and then sold them all in the late 90s. Since then, her life's journey has been of a spiritual nature. She's gone on hundreds of retreats, written a best-selling book, The Practice, and started peacefulmindpeacefullife.org, a nonprofit organization whose following is now in the millions, with her daughter Michelle. To say that this conversation meant a lot to me would be a massive undersell. It's actually quite hard for me to find the words that accurately state the impact that my talk with Barb had on my own life. She allows herself to be vulnerable in such a way that you can't doubt her strength of mind and spirit. I could go just on and on and on about this interview, but the truth is she knocked it completely out of the park. And it's with all the gratitude that I'm capable of conjuring that I bring to you my interview with the amazing Barb Schmidt. So after reading your book, I was struck by, the beginning. So can you tell me about school? Because you started working at McDonald's while you were in school, but I'd like to learn a little bit about Barb before McDonald's.
So if you can imagine, I'm 14 years old on the school bus, sitting in the back of the bus, no friends, trying to pretend like I'm not there, just kind of minding my own business, watching people get on and off, but feeling like I want to make sure that I'm invisible. So every time somebody would get on and off, I would kind of slouch down into the chair and make sure that they didn't see me because I don't want anyone sitting next to me. So I was I was a girl that never felt like I fit in. You've heard that phrase, on the outside looking in. That was me tenfold. I felt like I didn't matter. I really didn't want anyone engaging me or talking to me. So when it was time for me to get off the bus, I would kind of try to slide off without people noticing. And the same was true when I went to my front door at the house. Both my parents were alcoholics, and I tried to slide in the door as best I could because I didn't know what I was going to show up to when I got home. So my whole life kind of surrounded being with me, but feeling alone, feeling that I didn't matter, and just trying to make it through life the best that I could without, falling apart or without really disappearing totally. So that was my life, and everything was chaotic, unpredictable, difficult. Being the oldest of 5, I got the brunt of everything. And I think that's probably typical in a lot of families that have a lot of dysfunction or addiction or anything like that. The oldest is kind of expected to carry the weight or be the wisdom or be the person. I had 3 younger brothers and a sister. So yeah, I took the brunt of everything. So making sure that I was perfect and didn't do anything wrong. And as the daughter, trying to figure out if I could just be good enough. And that's, I think, where the perfectionism and that there was something wrong with me. I wasn't good enough. So that's why all this was happening. Or I wasn't smart enough. Or if I could just be a better daughter, everything would be better. So that was my life.
Reading your book, I see this very empowered woman who led a high-powered career. To think about you as, a little kid on the bus slinking down, hoping that nobody sees you is pretty profound. In your home life, was that the case? Because, you're taking care of your siblings. So how did you go about taking care of them in that situation?
So in my home life, it was more about how can I do everything that I need to do, make everything okay? Can I be in the middle of things to keep the fighting from happening? Or can I say something that might help? So I wasn't invisible at home. I just tried to always do the right thing. So if you can imagine in your head, what can I do in this moment that'll be okay? What can I do here so this doesn't erupt or cause some kind of tension or some kind of huge fight or huge problem? As I always try to say to people that you're kind of on guard, kind of on high alert. Like, what can I do now to make sure everything is okay? So if you think about all the energy and the mind, my mind was constantly trying to figure out what to do next and just do it as best that I possibly could. You know, so I didn't have any friends. You really can't. I mean, I guess you could have friends. You know, back then I'm 61 years old, so life was a lot different back then. There's no social security, that kind of stuff. So I didn't have any friends, couldn't bring friends over because I certainly didn't want to introduce them to the life that I was living. Because in my mind, we were different. Everyone else had a different kind of life and they were happy and they had money. We had no money. And, you know, they were just living a good life. I'd watch television and the shows that I'd watch, like The Brady Bunch or That Girl or all those old shows, Father's Knows Best, all those things, you know, they painted that picture that most family lives were wonderful. We're happy. The families got along. It was joyful.
As far as making friends and stuff like that, was it a matter of shame? You didn't want to bring them into that situation?
Yes, I think shame. And I think also there's a point where you try to pretend like it's not really real. So I didn't want people to know what was real. So I'd go to school and try to be pleasant, or I'd stuck to myself a lot in the later years when I would talk with my sister. This was much later after graduating from high school and treatment and all of that. I was talking to my sister and we were telling our stories a little bit. And she said, but Barb, you were so quiet. People thought you were stuck up. And I said, oh my gosh, what? She goes, yeah. She said, they wanted to be your friend, but they just thought you were better than they were. And I just really took a gulp back then because I thought, oh my goodness, isn't this the truth of we think that we don't matter, we don't fit in, so we're trying to be quiet so we don't disrupt things, because that's what I learned at home. But in actuality, it was coming across that I was aloof and that I wasn't good enough for them. It's kind of amazing what we think is being perceived by other people. Most of the time is not actually the case. So yeah, it wasn't worth it. And I didn't know, you know, my mom, both were alcoholic, but my mom was the more severe alcoholic. So invite a friend over, you never know what you're going to get. And I did not ever want to take that risk.
So,
you know, they might just like even more. They might know the truth. And if they actually knew the truth, then I really would be alone. It's kind of a weird dynamic that happens when you're a child of an alcoholic or an addiction. It doesn't quite make any sense. I felt alone, but then I didn't want people to but I didn't really want to be alone. So it's a weird thing that goes on inside of you.
And I think, you know, you're 14 years old. You're just a child, and there's so many other things to deal with as a 14-year-old that is put that on top of everything. And it's obviously no wonder that it's hard to, you know, function in a healthy way. Okay. So your home life is the way it is. Did you do well in school? Like, were you always a high achiever?
I was. I did really, really well. I think that can be the product of addiction or an alcoholic family. You know, high achieving, perfectionism, wanting to do the best. And I think that was the start of my thinking that if I can look pretty, if I can be smart, all those external things are a way that I can stand out. Then people will like me. Then I'll be successful. As I said, we didn't really have any money. We didn't have much. It was so chaotic and unpredictable. In my mind, I thought, if I can make it successfully, if I can just have money, if I can be rich and famous, if I can be pretty enough, thin enough, good enough, all the enoughs, then everything will be okay. I'll be happy. I'll feel good. I won't be so depressed. And I don't mean depressed in a way that I couldn't function. I think sometimes when I use the word depression, people think of depression today as, you know, you can't move, but just a profound sadness that things aren't okay the way they are right now. So I have to try to make it better. And how can I do that? And so everything external in my mind was how I could do that. So yeah, I achieved in school, and the teachers really liked me. I was a good girl. I never caused trouble. I never did anything wrong. And they would say, Barb, I remember one day in my math class, Algebra 1, I didn't do well. I got a D. And she came up to me. She called me after class and she said, I know that you can do better than this because you are so smart. You're this, you're that. I know that you can do better. I just want you to know that I know that this is not you. I got straight A's the rest of my time with her and in all of my math classes. So if someone did show me some attention and a little bit of, wow, I know that you're better than this, or I do see you are good already, it even encouraged me more to be better. to do better, to even put forth more effort to achieve and be the best.
So that drive is just an innate part of you.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's why I excelled so much in McDonald's. It was a little bit of attention, a little bit of, wow, you're amazing, made me even more determined, stronger, more empowered to keep doing better and to always do my best and to be the best. It was really important to me. I wanted to be the best. I wanted to be on top, kind of that on top of the world.
Mm-hmm. So when did you start working at McDonald's initially? How old were you?
14.
14-year-old.
14. As a 14-year-old back then, you could. This was 1972. So at 14, we ate at McDonald's quite a bit. It was right down the street from our house. So I got out of the car to pick up our food, and there was a sign on the door that said help wanted. And inside of me, I thought I was already working 3 other jobs. I delivered newspapers in the morning. In the afternoon, we lived in the Chicago area. And I also washed hair at a hair salon. So I was already working. I thought, wow, this would really get me out of the house. This could be amazing. So I asked the cashier, are you hiring? And do you hire 14-year-olds? And she got the manager, gave me an application, filled it out before I left, interviewed the next day, and was working there 3 days later. I just knew that there was a piece of me inside that just knew this was going to save my life, or this was going to be exactly what I needed to achieve all the things that I had in my mind. Be rich, be famous, be happy, be secure, be liked. So I started working right away.
Did you ever have any feelings of guilt as far as working 4 jobs, knowing what's going on at home with your siblings?
That's a good question. No one's ever asked me that before. No, I wanted out. It was hard enough to try to handle it. And I think there was a part of me, because I took the brunt being the oldest, there was a piece of me that felt like they could my sister was only 2 years younger. So she was the favorite. She was very responsible herself, had a lot of friends, and was out of the house a lot herself, doing fun things and doing all of that. But she also was responsible, and she was the favorite. So I think I felt, well, she could pick up the slack, or she could pick up what needs to be done. So it never crossed my mind. My whole goal was to get out and find a place where I fit in, or find a place where I mattered, or where I could thrive, because I knew I was thriving at school. So I knew it was in me, and I just needed to get out.
How old were you when you got your first franchise?
So I worked my way up, obviously, from being a cashier and a grill cook. 1979, 1980. So I was born in 50, 23 years old. Got married in 1977. I married my supervisors. I was a store manager. And so 23 years old, we owned our first McDonald's restaurant.
How did that feel?
Amazing. As I think back when I do these interviews or even wrote about it in the book, it's kind of surreal when I write that I was 23 years old. And when I do talks, I talk a lot to kids, high school kids and college kids and athletes. And the first question always is, we want to do that too. How did you do that at 23 years old? And I'm like, that can't happen today. It isn't set up that way today. Business isn't set up that way today, but it felt really, really good to be out on my own. I graduated in 1974, graduated high school in 1974, and moved out that same year. So I wasn't even 18 years old. I was 17 years old, bought a car, signed a lease on an apartment, and started working as a McDonald's manager at $125 a week. Really an independent, working on my own, living on my own in the suburbs of Chicago at 17 years old. But I felt 30. So at 23, it's cool for me to say, wow, that felt really good. I was 23, but I felt like I was already, 30 or 35 or 40 years old. I always felt older than I was, because I didn't really feel like I had much of a childhood. I didn't have the play and the fun and those kind of things that a lot have. So it wasn't weird, or it didn't feel like, wow, I've accomplished something so young. It was like I expected it, and it needed to keep happening.
And likely, what's next after the first one? I will say, so there's a little bit of parallel with my own profession. When I was 19 years old, I wanted to become a professional poker player. It was just my friend played cards. I wanted to as well. And I was working at Applebee's at the time, and I saved up $3,000 or $4,000, put everything I owned into my car, drove like 10 hours to Florida because he knew way more than me, so that, we could work together and he could teach me and I could learn it and give it a shot. And people, telling that story now, like I've coached a lot of people, I have a lot of students. If anybody were to tell me that was their plan, I would be like, no, like it's not really possible in today's climate. And I feel like the same is for you with McDonald's. There was an opportunity there that existed for that period of time that probably doesn't exist today. But there are other opportunities that do exist today that people can take advantage of. And as we go through life, I think a lot of these opportunities close and then more spring up, if you're a driven, opportunistic type of person.
You're right. There's so many. I mean, you look at all the young, really, really young, successful people today, and I think it is a product of the times and the social media and the internet and all the things, the connectivity that we have around the world that's totally different than in my generation, yours.
Even mine. Yeah. I'm only 34, but I remember, I was watching a movie the other day, The Bad News Bears, and all the parents are at the kids, baseball game, just sitting in the stands. And I was watching the movie and I just thought, wow, like they're watching the game. Like there's nobody has a cell phone. Like nobody's face is in a phone, until like 2005. I mean, that's really how it was. Like I was probably 20 years old the first time I had a cell phone that could access the internet. And then it took forever to load anything.
As a sidebar, you see that today when you're out at a restaurant. I think of my daughter. When I had a child, you took her to a restaurant, or I took her to a restaurant, and we made do. She got, rowdy or whatever. I didn't have an iPad to put in front of her to watch, the movies or even to listen to music or any of that kind of stuff. We dealt with whatever was happening in the moment, because all we were doing was talking. We weren't on our phones. We weren't watching TV. We weren't doing anything like that. So it is pretty amazing how different things are and what we do to calm things down or to make things okay, or how do we deal or how do we settle into moments and into situations. It's so totally different. You're right.
There's just a lack of presence, I think, nowadays, that I'm not sure what's going to happen or what the toll is, because I think it's too early to tell. Smartphones are very new. But I don't think it's necessarily a great thing.
Right. I agree with you. I think it's interesting with the work you said you do. You work with a lot of students, and so do I, and so many people do. I think the one thing I notice the most, and the question I get the most is, how can I get comfortable in the moment? How do I stop my mind from racing with stress or anxiety or pressure, or I want to be here with my friend doing whatever I'm doing, but my mind never stops. And not like it wasn't that way for me too. My mind never stopped either. But there are so many more distractions in the external world today, or things that are pulling you to do this or do that or get on your phone. Almost like an addiction. Back in the day, we used alcohol and drugs and all of those kind of things to numb ourselves from feeling the pain or feeling the loneliness or feeling the uncomfortable feelings of the moment, where now, let me just grab my phone. I'll see what's happening on social media. So
you said that basically people struggle with their thoughts, their mind running away with them. I feel like that's a normal thing. That's that's the normal human brain going crazy. So is it more just becoming comfortable with the craziness?
I agree. The mind is for thinking. It's what it does. When I believe people still to this day have a misconception of what meditation is and is supposed to do. Just to sit down to meditate, you're not meant to stop your mind from thinking. You can't do that. I always say to people, okay, just stop thinking. And you can't, because the mind was made to think, which is a really good thing. I'm glad that I have my mind, and I'm glad that I can think, and I've been successful because of my mind and my thinking. But I believe it's more about choice and how to not stop the mind from thinking, but how can I choose something different? How can I choose to look at it differently? How can I recognize and become aware? So aware that what my mind is thinking, wow, my mind is really in a negative mindset right now. I'm impatient. I'm judging. I'm being critical. I'm now notice that I'm starting to feel angry, or I'm starting to feel sad, or I'm starting to feel like I can't handle or I can't deal. And it's just being aware of all of those thoughts and all those things and recognizing, well, I have a choice. It's my mind that's taken me down this rabbit hole. It really isn't what's happening in the external world. It's really my perception and allowing my mind to continue thinking one thought after the other that leads into a negative drain.
And something that you were talking about while you're in school, a good question to ask yourself is this true? Are my thoughts even true? Is the negativity that's going through my mind, is it even a real thing? And that's something that through meditating fairly regularly, giving myself a split second to think about, when I'm going down the rabbit hole and I'm annoyed, I'm pissed off or whatever it is, ask myself, is this true? And then think about it with a rational mind. And a lot of times it's not. The path I'm going down is just completely fabricated by me. And sorry, I don't mean to talk so much, but
it's true. It's nice to speak with someone that gets it, because when you really know it, that's where your power is, or is in knowing.
It's not always a super trivial thing, having just that split second awareness, because it can prevent fights with significant others and friends and accusations, and you can save yourself a lot of suffering. I read a book, The Art of Learning, by Josh Waitzkin, and he spoke about a woman. He was walking down the side of the road, and she had her headphones on the sidewalk in New York, and I guess somebody swerved close to her, and instead of getting off the sidewalk, recognizing the danger, it was totally her fault, right? She started, yelling at them because they got close to her, and then the car behind him hit her. And, she flew up into the air. And I just think that's where a second of realizing what's going on and stepping back possibly saved her life. I'm not sure exactly what happened to her, but I'm sure it was not a good thing, very traumatic. And things like this have the possibility of happening every single day.
I think too, what you just brought up in that story is so profound that unless we can begin to become aware and notice and start taking responsibility for our actions and our responses, I believe strongly, mindfulness equals choice equals happiness. That's where our happiness and success lies in life. So in her situation, her first reaction was to get angry at the person that almost hit her instead of taking a pause. We don't pause in this. We rarely pause ever, even in my own generation, obviously. But we don't pause at all now. So if she could have taken a pause, oh my goodness, what just happened? And instead of what did he or she do to me, what just happened? And let me just look at this situation for just a second. Whoa, I might not have been paying attention. Or whoa, thank goodness that person didn't hit me. What was I thinking, or what was I doing? I was distracted. We're so quick to blame the other person instantly, or to get angry, or to think that someone did something to me, because we feel at the mercy of the external world all the time. So rarely take responsibility for our own actions and choices. And I think that's what meditation, mindfulness, breathing, learning how to take the pause and understand that the thoughts are going. What science says, we think 50,000 thoughts a day. 85% of those are negative. 75% of those negative thoughts are repetitive. I mean, if you really believe that, which I do, reading the science that came out of Harvard, no wonder. And so if we add everything else on top of it, we just don't take a break for a second to try to assess what's happening in the moment.
This is why we should take the time to practice focus, build our attention. Only takes 12 minutes a day if you sit down and meditate. Okay, so I want to go back again. Back to the McDonald's days. I don't know where I just led us some way off the path. So you have your first McDonald's, you're doing well. Firstly, in your book, your family wasn't exactly thrilled that you wanted to pursue a career in McDonald's. Can you tell me about doing it despite any objection?
No, they weren't. My mother didn't go to college. And so being the firstborn, my dad did, but being the firstborn, she had high hopes that I would go to college, and be that first girl in the family to go to college. And I was smart enough, and I had been accepted to a couple of colleges. So when I was graduating, so remember, this is the McDonald's days. I'm in the Chicago area, and this is Ray Kroc. That's where all this started, was in Chicago area. So not only was I thriving and doing really well, and they loved me so much, I was like their star employee. When back in the day, he would tour the stores. So he'd come into the store, and I'll never forget the day he walked in. I'm 16 years old and I'm working up there at the front counter in the front. And he walked in and he said, Barbara, the store looks really good today. I'm proud of you. Buddha, Jesus, Krishna, any of those people could have walked to the door and said that to me today. I'd be like, whoa. So it impacted me a lot, and it gave me the self-esteem and the ability to know that, wow, I can make it. I really can do this. And it has nothing to do with my family. It has nothing to do with what's happening in my family. I was able to separate that. So a few weeks before I graduated, the owner of the stores at the time came to me and said, look, we don't really want to lose you. We'll offer you $125 a week. And simultaneously at that same time, my parents were starting to spiral down into a really bad situation. So they had decided that they were going to move to Southern Indiana.
What is the equivalent of $125 a week, like in today's money?
That was, I could buy a car, obviously making payments. I think my payments were $65 a week. I could buy a car. I could rent an apartment, which was $250 a month, buy gas, buy food, live my life.
So you were able to be completely self-sufficient.
Okay. Completely. At 17 years old, once I graduated, I was 100% self-sufficient.
Okay. I just wanted to get a picture of it. It's hard to...
It is hard to imagine $125 a week could do that. I will add that all the male managers were making $165 a week. There was that happening back then that would have been 1974. There was obviously that happening. It still happens today. So there was happening back then that the men were paid more. But I think what was so unique in my situation, because of my desire and because of my ability to thrive and achieve so much so fast, you weren't back then able to become a McDonald's manager. I started in 72. Here I'm running my own store in 1974. So really only 2 years of working. So that's very unusual. And I was, a girl, which was also unusual. So I was self-sufficient. McDonald's was everything to me. So my parents weren't happy because I was working in a restaurant in their minds. You went to high school, you graduated, you did really well, and you're going to work in a restaurant. They didn't really get it. And I understood that. There was a little part of me that thought, wow, I'm working in a restaurant. Is this what I really should be doing? I had that dialogue and that thinking going on in my mind from time to time, but the answer was always absolutely yes. Oh my gosh, I love it. There's something to be said. I talk about this a lot even today, that really find what you love and you will excel in it. You will achieve. And that is so true for me. I loved it. I loved going to work. I loved being there. I loved the people. And here's an introvert that sat at the back of the bus, tried to hide. I loved talking to the customers. I was a great manager. I loved working with my people. So it really brought out who I really was inside. When you started this interview, you said it's hard for me to imagine a successful, powerful person sitting in the back of the bus, trying to hide. That isn't really who I was or who I am. So who I really am was brought forth big time through McDonald's.
You mentioned you're an introvert, and that's something that I guess doesn't change. I consider myself an introvert as well. What are the benefits that you've gotten from being more of an introvert or introspective person?
It's a really good question. I can be by myself. I love being by myself. When I first started going on retreats after I got on treatment, I would go on silent retreats. And so many people would say to me, how do you stay silent for 7 days? How does anybody stay silent for 7 days? And I love it. So I love that me time. I love being by myself. I'm okay not talking. I'm okay being with myself. And I think it's a good balance and a really good blend of being okay by myself, but also loving being with people.
How do you think it gave you an edge as far as your McDonald's career early on?
It's funny that you're asking that question. I was thinking about this a few months ago, how McDonald's and the structure of McDonald's and the foundation of McDonald's really gave me a great platform and foundation for my meditation and my spiritual practice. Because being an introvert and things would go wrong at the store, it was a high pressure. I don't want to give you the picture that this was just all fun and games. And it was a constant 24/7 high pressure stress. You were on all the time. So being an introvert, though, I found ways to be by myself, or I didn't engage in things in the external world that didn't get me to where I needed to go, or that didn't drain my energy for what I was trying to accomplish or for what I was trying to do. So I didn't, fritter my energy away on things that were not meaningful, that didn't matter. So I could be by myself, nourish myself, because I wasn't out there doing all those party type social things that a lot of people were doing. Not to say we didn't go to McDonald's functions, but very minimally.
And for those of you listening the major difference between an extrovert and an introvert is extroverts get energy from people and crowds, and introverts tend to have their energy given to people in crowds, in social situations. So that's why introverts can get worn down. On the flip side too, when you speak to somebody about something you're passionate about, or you have a love that you're driven towards, as an introvert, I find myself getting, a little obsessive, just trying to do everything I possibly can to make it work. I know I drive my wife nuts with all of my questions and ideas when I get something in my mind. So you have your first McDonald's every day, putting out fires all the time type situation. And then you start accumulating more and more. Did McDonald's have a system set up in place to take care of those individual stores? Did you hire the managers? How did you go about building your businesses?
Yes, McDonald's has a very well thought out system. So the more sales you do and the higher the grades, they would come in and grade you every quarter, and then you got a grade. So the better you did, the more they rewarded you. So we had our second store before a year was up.
Oh, wow.
And then we had the third store. So by 26, I had 4. We had 4. So it was all based on merit. I mean, if you were doing a good job and they like what you were doing, then we're going to build another one over here. We want to offer it to you. You're doing a good job. So you though are 100% responsible for hiring your managers, hiring your people. It's a franchise. So they take their percentage off the top. They're the ones that award you a new store. They come in and monitor you and grade you and look at your financials and look at everything. But at the end of the day, you are 100% responsible for your insurance, employees, everything.
Yeah. And again, in that situation, that was a period of time where McDonald's, I'm sure one of their major goals is expansion and building as many stores as possible. So again, in a different time period, you may not have had that opportunity because that wasn't what their goal was.
Right. Well, remember you're so right, Brad. And remember back then, there wasn't really an international presence. McDonald's was 100% focused on the United States. I remember it wasn't until a little bit later that they went into Canada. And so it was really a United States national presence. So you're right. They were building them as fast as they could find the property, to buy the property, to do all the testing and everything to see if it was had a chance to be successful. Now the international component is so much larger than the national component. If you look at the United States model, the McDonald's model today. So yeah, it was just it was the times.
The time and the right place, right? In the McDonald's area. Like I said before, I think that no matter what, you would have been the type of person to capitalize on an opportunity, whatever it would have been. That's just the one that presented itself to you at the time.
Very, I agree completely. I remember watching That Girl with Marlo Thomas. If anybody's listening that remembers way back then, her walking down the streets of New York, thinking that would be my life. I'm going to be living in New York, because back then you looked at a life like that, living in a suburb of Chicago, and you looked at New York and you thought, wow, New York was the symbol of making it. So I think you're right. Whatever opportunity had presented itself, and it was McDonald's walking in the door at 14 years old to pick up our hamburgers, and it was where I landed.
So moving beyond McDonald's, well, actually sort of mixed in with McDonald's, I think, you started meditating. I guess the next thing that I'd like to talk about is suffering, because from all reports, you were living the American dream and yet still felt like something was missing, like you were missing something. You weren't exactly happy. which is, I think, tough for a lot of people to reconcile when you're striving. You get everything that you've worked for and still emptiness. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, it's, I wrote about it in the book, and I never forget the day that, we had 4 McDonald's restaurants at the time. And I remember being at work, which I worked 24/7. I rarely took ever any time off. And I remember being at work, and it hit me that I was so unhappy and so sad. And I had just won the biggest award that McDonald's gives, the Ronald McDonald Award. And the next thought that came in my mind was, Barb, it's because you're not working hard enough. You're not good enough. You need to do more. You're not achieving enough. And so in the regular person or a normal person might look at that and say, well, what else could you do? But that was me. And that was being a product, I think, of my childhood, and always thinking that if I wasn't happy, then I wasn't doing something right. Even if I had all of this stuff, a house, a husband, 4 McDonald's restaurants, money, power, everything, and all these awards, there was something that I was not doing right. And I remember my supervisor walked in the next day, and we were talking, and he brought in another award that we had won. And we were talking, we were living, just living large, living really well. Everything was great. And he said, I can tell you've been so successful so fast, and I can tell you must really be happy because you look like you've put on weight since I've been here, since I've been supervising your stores. Well, I didn't hear one word he said after that. I think he was there the rest of the day doing his reports and checking out the employees and all, the paperwork and all that. I did not hear one more word. My whole mind was obsessed with, that's the problem. That's what's wrong with me. That's why I'm not happy. Oh my gosh, I'm fat. I'm not good enough. It affirmed for me what my thoughts were telling me. You're not good enough. You are doing something wrong. This is why you're not happy. So it's really bizarre to me when I think back on it as a 61-year-old today, that I thought, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I didn't think that I could stop eating. And so I remember one day eating dinner and feeling so loathsome about myself. And oh my gosh, he's so right. I'm so fat. This is my problem. And really feeling sick. So I thought, I'm just going to throw up. And I did. And I felt great. I said, oh my gosh, I feel better. This is the answer. This is all that I need to do. And that led to over 6 years of suffering with the eating disorder of bulimia. So I feel strongly that I was so looking at everything else that was happening in the external world was the issue and was my problem. And if I could just do things right, everything would be okay. And so the bulimia, I woke up one morning and didn't get out of bed and told my husband at the time that I wasn't going to work, and he thought something was really wrong with me. He said, should I call a doctor? And I said, no, I'm not going to work. Opened up the Fort Lauderdale Sun-Sentinel, and one side of it had a tribute to Karen Carpenter, the 1-year anniversary of her death. She died in 1983. And so reading about her death, she was my favorite musician ever as a kid. And when I'd heard she died, it's so fascinating to me how the mind can trick you so much. When she died, I had no clue she died of what I was suffering from. I just thought, this is really sad. Karen Carpenter died. Oh my God, she's so young. I wonder what happened. And I'm reading the story back then in 1983 and had no idea. Barb, this is exactly what you're doing. And then in 1984, reading the 1-year anniversary of her death, I started to cry, and a voice said to me, you're going to die too. You need to go get help. So drove over to Naples the next day and checked myself into treatment. That's, I think, the whole culmination of the power and the strength and the ability to be able to listen, even for a second, at that voice inside of you that is not the thinking mind voice. There's two voices that are happening simultaneously inside of you. That's the voice inside that's really trying to take care of you and teach you and give you the wisdom to wake up.
So it sounds like to me, hearing about your path, you're a problem solver. And the bulimia, to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, seems like you knew something wasn't right. And so there was a problem that you needed to solve. And you got fixated on the idea that your weight was the problem. And so you decided to solve it. And then until things got bad and you realized that, oh, this is not good. I've created, another problem for myself. I mean, was that it? Once you got treatment and got help, did you get over the eating disorder?
Yes. But I want to just back up a second. A problem solver, yes. But also a person that felt like that there was always something wrong with me. So I guess the idea of problem solver, yes, that is something wrong with me. I've got to solve that problem. But for me, it's somehow out there. The idea that there's something wrong with me. I'm never good enough. I'm never smart enough. I'm never thin enough. I'm never pretty enough. If I can just do whatever it is that I need to do and fix me.
So it's your self-image.
It's your self-image. It's still that little girl that doesn't matter. So it's kind of a separation almost. The bulimia, as you look at bulimia back when it first started, I loved it. I mean, it was like, oh my God, I even said this to my husband at the time. I said, I have found the magic cure and the magic answer to gaining weight and being fat. I mean, when I think back on some of the things I said, it's laughable, but it was how I felt at the time. I thought, wow, I found it. And so the bulimia, though, as it progressed and obviously when I went into treatment and learned, the bulimia is about how do you not feel the feelings and suffer. So it starts off as a way to not feel the feelings. Wow, this is really good. It's working. I am getting thinner. I am feeling better. I am happier. I mean, it's so counterproductive to think, wow, you're suffering from bulimia and you're happier. It's how it starts out, but it certainly doesn't end up that way because it takes a toll, obviously, on the body and the mind and spirit and all of those things. And then you start to really become weak and it starts to affect your body. Forget the mind. It really starts to affect your body and you can't get out of bed and you don't feel like doing anything. So I feel that it's fixing the problem. Yes, I am a problem solver and a problem fixer. But more than that, I am the problem. It was me that was the problem. And if I could just get good enough and smart enough and perfect enough, then my life would be happy. And I think when the Dalai Lama says our lives are meant to be happy, everyone is seeking happiness, there are no more truer words, I think, than any human being on the planet. We all want that feeling of happiness. When I look at my suffering, when I look at everything that was going on for me, I was always trying to find happiness. How can I just be okay? Could I just be happy? Could I just settle into this moment where everything is okay? I'm okay. I'm enough. So treatment, yes, it solved the symptoms and it solved the bulimia. I was in therapy and all of those things, but it took a long time after treatment. It was my practice and meditation and my desire to not relapse and to not die, but also not to lose what I had gained in treatment, lose the connection, the little bit of connection that I'd started forming with myself, the happiness, the love, the camaraderie with friends, the idea that I'm not alone because there was a whole treatment center full of people suffering from the same thing that I was suffering from. So wow, there's a whole community of us out there that are feeling the exact same way.
Before the internet, before you could, read about other people's experiences, I imagine that having, social proof that there are people just like you was probably a very reassuring thing.
Oh my gosh, everything. Well, imagine 1984, no phones, checking into a treatment center. And when they took me to my room, no TV, nobody. And so I was an introvert. So that was kind of okay for me. I was used to being alone, but to be in a room by myself with zero distraction whatsoever, not even someone to talk to ever. The lights were out at night. We had our interaction during the day, but you think about how many hours I spent in a room by myself with no television, no telephone. We couldn't call home. We couldn't talk to anyone in the outside world. At first I thought, what did I do? I made a serious mistake here. How can I get out? Can I change my mind? And then it was really fast that I settled into it and loved it. And I thought, and in the beginning, of course, because this is what the mind and my, not feeling good enough kind of a person was. In the beginning, I thought, oh, I finally escaped. I finally was able to check out and now I'm okay. And of course, we don't want to check out. We don't want to be away from people altogether. But the beginning thoughts were, wow, I was able to check out and escape from life because life was the problem. And now I'm starting to, feel okay. So yeah, it was really scary. The thought of being totally alone in a room with zero distractions. But I think it was everything that I needed.
Can you pinpoint a moment where, you sort of had a breakthrough and the healing began?
Yeah, I might cry because I was talking about this recently. Being the person that had to always be good enough and to be smart enough and to be the best. I realized walking into that treatment center that the head of it was a gentleman. His first name was Fred. Very gregarious, fun-loving, just a really nice person. And I remember meeting him thinking, I want to be his favorite. I want him to like me the most. And here I own 4 McDonald's restaurants and I'm 28 years old now or 27 years old. And that's what's in my mind. I want to be his favorite, like a little girl. I want to be his favorite. I want him to like me the best. I'm going to be the best. I'm going to be the best recovering bulimic I've ever had. These are all the thoughts that are going on in my mind. And so the first day we met and everything. So every day after that, I was there 6 weeks. Every day after that, he didn't even say hello to me. Not a hello. Not even an acknowledgement that I was there. And I remember my first therapy session with my therapist, Joyce, in that first week. We were talking and she could tell something was wrong with me. And I said, well, I just don't understand Fred. I don't think he likes me. So I'm in treatment for bulimia to talk about all the horrific things that have gone on in my life, for the past 27 years. And that's what I bring up to her. I don't think that he likes me. And she looked at me and she said, what? All the things that we could be talking about right now, you've never spoken a word of anything about your life to anyone. And this is what you want to talk about. You don't think that Fred likes you. And I said, yeah, I'm miserable. This is not going to work. I don't think that he likes me. And she said, just proceeded to say so many brilliant things. She said, do you like everyone? I said, no. And she said, well, why do you think he needs to like you then? I said, because he has to. I mean, this is my life. So we went into this whole thing, and this was really at the root or a huge cause of a lot of my suffering, thinking that my happiness depended on people liking me. And so I had to be whatever it was I thought that they wanted me to be, or I had to be that good girl. So it really came full force in front of me that, wow, I really care a lot about what other people think of me. Not only do I care a lot about it, it's everything to me. It matters more what you think of me than what I think of me, and that I don't really matter. So it came full force to me like, wow, this really sounds crazy. Because when you're by yourself with yourself all these days in treatment, you spend a lot of time with your thoughts. And I thought if anybody else was telling me this, I would say, wow, it doesn't matter what other people think of you. It matters what you think of you. And fast forward, they do a little it's not called graduation, but they do a little ceremony for everybody that leaves treatment to go out into the world. And he stood up and he gave us, when he talks about each person, and I'm sitting there thinking, I can't imagine what he's going to say about me because we haven't had 3 words since I checked in. He did this beautiful talk. Like, I knew from the day I met Barb that she needed my approval. And I couldn't give it to her because I needed for her to find her own approval. It's been the hardest thing that I've done for 6 weeks because I think she's an amazing human being. And I would have loved to have been able to spend time talking to her and spending time with her. But I know that the greatest gift she got from this treatment was to understand that loving herself, knowing herself completely, being exactly who she is and honoring who she is the most important thing she could have ever learned here. And I'm crying and everybody's crying. I thought, wow, that was the greatest gift. So it never left me. And it's not that that's been perfect for the past 34 years, but I've never forgotten that the most important relationship we have in life is the one that we have with ourselves. And it doesn't matter what other people think of us. We're going to care, of course. But what matters most is, are we being who we are? Are we living honestly and truthfully comfortable and authentically in our own skin? And how do we feel about us as a human being? So I've been able to develop that strong relationship with me over the past 34 years, which I think has led to my being in recovery.
That's an incredible story. And
I owe him a lot. I don't know where he is today, but I owe him so much.
I mean, what a blessing. And it's really fortune. There could have been so many different people in that situation that weren't able to recognize what was in your best interest, or maybe even did recognize what was in your best interest and acted to the contrary. That's an incredible teacher. And that's really an awesome story. Do you still struggle? Struggle?
Absolutely. I don't struggle with bulimia. I struggle with the thoughts. And I say, yeah, I said this to a group of girls recently. It's not often, but there have been times, and I may have put it in the book, or it's going in the next book. I'm in the process of writing my next book. There are times when I'll be getting dressed to go to a luncheon, or I'll be getting ready to go talk to 115 football players. And I'll look at myself in the mirror and the thought will be, who do you think you are? You can't do this. Are you crazy? You can't go in front of those 115 football players walking in there. I mean, who do you think you are? And that's what you were talking about earlier, Brad, about is it true? Are the thoughts in the mind telling you the truth? So my practice, I tell people it's not about stop. You can't change and stop every thought that comes into your mind. Thoughts come into your mind. They come in unwanted. They come in without being invited. You have no idea what that thought's going to be. And we are conditioned. And certainly my 61 years of suffering with bulimia and low self-esteem and low self-worth, it's a conditioning that's in there. And little by little, I've transformed it in a miraculous, amazingly beautiful way. But yeah, those things are going to come from time to time. I was going to a luncheon, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago, and I was getting dressed and the thought said, you know what, you're a little bit fat. This doesn't look quite right on you. So then I have a choice. I can follow that thought and believe it and say, oh my gosh, this isn't working. Or I laugh and I say, that is not true. Because I really strongly believe, I try to help people see that if you can intercept the thought once you have it, give it that space. You know, Viktor Frankl, one of my most powerful teachers, even though he wasn't alive, he wrote
Man's Search
for Meaning. Yeah, in the concentration camp. You know, he says between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space lies your choice. And in that choice lies your freedom. So I believe that with all of my heart and soul because I practice that. So when a thought comes, you're too fat, this outfit doesn't look good on you, I don't believe it. I pause. Wait a minute, that's not true. And oftentimes I laugh and it's done. But there might be the rare time where I say that's not true. And the thought will say, really? It used to be true. And I'll say, yeah, but it's not true today. That's not really who I am. You know, you can leave now. And it's gone. I think having that deep relationship with you and understanding yourself completely, having a practice of knowing that there is the watcher of the thoughts in the mind, and there are the thoughts in the mind, that you are not the thoughts in your mind, that thought is not me, is very important.
I see so many parallels between you and I in that I remember, you know, being a bag boy at Bilo at 15 years old and having the thought, I'm going to be the best bag boy. I'm going to be the best cashier. I'm going to ring up more items per minute than anybody else in this store, right? Like, I'm going to do the best job of mopping up this restaurant. And it's obviously an absurd thought, but it's one that went through my head. And throughout all of my endeavors, that's the thought. I'm going to be the best X, Y, or Z. And I've come to realize that, number one, I'm not. Like, I'm not going to be the best interviewer. I'm not going to be the best poker player in the world. I'm not going to be all of these things. All I can focus on is being the best I am possible of and reaching my own potential. And every time before this interview, before the other interviews that I've done, I had this anxiety. I have this, who are you? Like this imposter syndrome. Like, who are you? You're not good enough to do this. You're going to blow it. It's going to be horrible. Because in my mind, like, I value your time and your energy very, very much. And it's my responsibility to create a piece that you're proud of. Facilitate a story that you can listen to it again and think, wow, that was really, really good. And that scares me. And I have this feeling of failure. But then I just push through and try to do the best job that I can. And unfortunately for you, next week I'll be a little bit better. And then the week after that, I'll be a little bit better. But that's just how it is for me.
But that's the beauty. I think that's what I love so much. And by the way, the first time I looked in the mirror and said, who are you to go speak in front of 110 or 115 football players? I tell them that, because that's the beauty of, we are human beings just trying to do the best that we can in every moment. So I can be the best me in this moment. And sometimes it's maybe stellar, and sometimes it's the best that I could do in that moment. And so when I said that to them the first day I walked in the door, the looks on their faces was surprise, because here I am, this professional person walking in to teach them meditation and mindfulness and learning how to be present. But it was relief. Because wow, and I feel that way just hearing that from you, and I hear it from everyone. I love it because we are all in this same boat. We are all the same in that way. No one doesn't have a thought that, wow, is this going to be good enough? Or are they going to be proud? Or am I going to be okay? Or we all have these thoughts. And I think to deny that we do does yourself a disservice in being able to really get to know yourself better and accept every single part of you. So I love that you shared that. And I think the people that I talk to love that I share that I'm not perfect just because I went to treatment and own McDonald's restaurants and now wrote a book and now tour around the world and have this amazing series at the local hospital. I'm not perfect. And there are days I show up and I might give a talk and I walk out and I think, well, that was as good as I could do today. But like you said, I think next week might be a little bit better or whatever it is, just being okay with who you are in the moment, being able to look at what's happening and learn from it. Every single day we're here to learn and grow from something and from someone and from some experience. And that's what makes us who we are. I think when you accept yourself that way, really accept yourself that way, then you can thrive and really be happy.
Yeah, we're all struggling. We all have our own struggles. I haven't lived a day of my life without having some sort of internal struggle about something. It's just the nature of the beast.
Life, Scott Peck, the first line of Scott Peck's book, The Road Less Traveled, life is difficult. Life is difficult
indeed. Moving on to the next thing is after the suffering, happiness and joy and cultivating those emotions within yourself, which I imagine is a daily process, a very regular thing in your life. First of all, what do you think gives people kind of the most bang for their buck as far as cultivating happiness or joy?
So I was asked, what do I define as happiness? And for me, happiness is not feeling like a victim or at the mercy of anything in the external world. And that's it, that I have 100% control over my own responses, my choices, my actions. And I think for me, that's the freedom of knowing that whatever's happening out there, I can handle it and I can do whatever it is that I need to do. But at the end of the day, I can't control it. And being a type A personality and having an addiction, those kind of go hand in hand with wanting control, wanting serious control. So for me over the years, to be able to continue to give up control over anything that's happening outside of me has been a miracle and a huge, huge blessing. So I would say for people, understand that your happiness lies in your ability to be able to be mindful, to be in the present moment, to understand that you have a choice, and that really your choice involves looking at the thoughts that you're thinking in the mind. And so that starts with a practice of being able to sit with yourself every day, even if it's just for a few minutes. There really is no set time, 15, 20, 30. Even if it's for a few minutes when you first get out of bed, just kind of close your eyes again and just notice how you feel. Scan your body. How am I feeling today? What am I thinking? What's happening for me in this moment before I get out of bed? It's huge when you are connected with what's happening for me. Who asks themselves that question? I do every single day. How are you feeling today, Barb? Before you even get out of bed, what's happening for you? How's your body feel? What are you thinking? And then I go walk my dog and I go sit in my meditation space. So having that connection with you, really caring about what are you thinking? What are you feeling? What's happening for you? And forming that relationship with you. We do become our own best friend.
Obviously, meditation's a regular practice in your life. I can imagine with so many demands on your time and attention, there are days that you wake up and think, I don't have time for it today. Or I need to do X, Y, or Z. Like I just need to get it done. How do you deal with maintaining the priority to meditation and pushing those things back?
Well, in the early days that was the case. I don't have time for it today, but did it anyway. And I think mine was tied to my recovery and understanding that this is my practice and this is what I do. And I started going on retreats right away when I got out of treatment. But meditation becomes a habit. That is true, that scientific belief that you can form habits and we can form good habits. And meditation becomes a habit just like brushing your teeth, taking a shower, putting on your clothes, eating breakfast, whatever it is, whatever routine you happen to have in your daily life. If meditation isn't a part of it, if you begin to make it a part of it and you truly desire it deeply, it becomes a habit. So I don't wake up in the morning thinking I don't have time to meditate. Absolutely, there are some days I wake up thinking, well, I'm tired. Let me sleep in. I don't. I said, nope, that's not what you do. You meditate, you get up. And that's very rare because I'm usually not tired when I get up. So it's something is going on or I've spent too many late nights or I'm traveling. So it's what I do. It becomes so a part of you. So that is a true thing that happens. It becomes part of you. It becomes part of your life. It becomes just like you wouldn't not go to a meeting that you have planned at work, just like you wouldn't maybe call your spouse or your partner or whatever just to check in to see how they're doing the day. We have all these habits that we do, all these routines that we do. Meditation is the same thing. It becomes routine, becomes a habit, and you just do it. I think too many people place emphasis on it being spiritual, which it is and can be, but get that out of your head in the beginning and just think, this is what I do. I'm going to go brush my teeth. I'm going to go meditate. I'm going to go walk my dog. I'm going to go, check it off the list. And somebody said to me recently, well, that puts it too in your head. It puts it too separated from your heart and your soul and your being. And I said, you don't need to pressure yourself to make it a part of your heart and your soul and your being. When you sit down in quiet with yourself, you are connecting with your heart and your soul and your being and your inner knowing and your deep sense of self. You don't have to make that happen. You can't make that happen, actually, I don't believe. You don't have to make that happen. You just assume the stance of least resistance. So I like to make it more scientific and more practical and take that whole connectedness, spiritual part out of it, because that's going to happen for you if you make it a practice and if you make it a part of your daily routine.
And the science completely backs it up. Yeah. It's as beneficial as, regularly working out your body. It's, working out your mind on a daily basis. And just the health benefits are outrageous. Just a super long list of what you gain from regular meditation practice.
And isn't that so cool? We didn't have that back in 19. I came out of treatment meditating and people thought it was crazy. Even though the Beatles and TM and all of that was happening, it wasn't happening for mainstream America for most people. So now all these decades of research, as you said, backs it all up. Plus, I promise you, if you sat down for one sitting of just sitting and not allowing your mind to tell you to get up because this is silly, it's not working, I'm not good enough, this isn't working, I can't stop thinking, just allowing those thoughts to come and go and stay seated. That's the practice and the power. I'm going to sit there anyway, even though my mind is telling me not to. This doesn't work. You're not, whatever. When you are done, you're going to walk into your day feeling better. And why? Why do I feel better? Because you just exerted your own power. no, I'm not letting these thoughts tell me to get out of this chair. I'm going to do what I want to do. And so we don't have power out there, but I feel like the most powerful person in the world. I'm so empowered because I have complete control over what I'm going to allow to occupy space in my mind, what I'm going to do, choices that I'm going to make, things that I'm going to say. And of course I make mistakes and I'll say something that I might wish that I could take those words back into my mouth. But I instantly will say, okay, let me fix it. Let me make a mess. Let me see what I can do. That wasn't the wisest choice, Barb. What could you do differently? How could I see this differently? It's powerful and you get that, but you have to do it. Yeah.
I love your resolve. And what strikes me is how obvious it must have been to you in the beginning of practicing meditation, the difference between a week ago and today. Because you, like you said, you didn't have the research. You didn't have the scientific data to look at. It was just intuition. It was like, holy crap, I felt horrible last week. I'm feeling much better this week. I've added one thing to my life. So for anybody out there that's considering incorporating a daily meditation practice, let that be a lesson. When you do it regularly, it's obvious, the benefits. Very obvious, very tangible.
I love. Yeah, and here's what happened for me. I sat down one day. First of all, I'm a good student. Become a great student. I'm a good student. If someone says, do this, I will try it. Meditation, in treatment. So I'm a really good student and I love learning. I really love learning. So I would sit in meditation and I think, okay, this isn't working, but I'd sit there. All of a sudden one day, and it wasn't too long into it, I would say probably a week, maybe, not even, feeling came over me of all is well. Do you know, in my entire life, I never felt that all is well. I mean, that's huge. And I remember thinking, I have goosebumps now telling you this, all is well. Oh my gosh, all is well. And I never denied that. I didn't break faith with that knowing that happened to me in that split second in that meditation. But that will happen to you. That will happen to anyone and is there any greater happiness than knowing that all is well? Whatever's happening, whatever's going on, just know all is well. That deep feeling of knowing that all is well. So what you're saying is so beautiful because it's so true that in a split second, just getting that feeling that all is well, but then you can't allow yourself to break faith with it. Don't allow the mind to tell you, oh, that's not real. Just walk outside. Nothing is well outside. And I never did, but I trusted and had faith and had hope. Hope is probably the lifeline of my life. If you were to ask me, what is the one thing that you always had from a little girl to now, is always hope. I always felt like there was hope. So have that faith and that hope.
As far as teachers, I know you've had a lot of teachers in your life. If you could limit it to just a couple, for people who want to learn more, who would you suggest?
Oh my gosh. And I think what I would say is there is a smorgasbord. Think of it as being at a buffet line of all of these different teachers. I would just start picking up a book and pick up a book and pick up a book and find one that resonates for you. It's hard because each teacher has taught me something different. So I can tell you Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Buddhist monk, profoundly changed my life about how to actually be and live in the present moment. And what did that mean? And mindfulness, profoundly changed my life. Because I wanted that so badly, to be happy in the present moment. Marianne Williamson in the early days, Scott Peck, no longer alive. I take a lot of teachings and learnings too from all of the great teachers that are no longer alive, all the saints and the mystics. I went on a 8-year journey of studying every single religion, every teacher, every master that embodied that religion and read their stories, not stories about the religions and not other people's interpretations of the religions and the teachers, but actually read the teachings of Jesus or the teachings of the Buddha or the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna so Brad, it's sorry, I'm stumbling so much. It's a hard question to answer because I feel like you have to find what touches your heart and step both feet in fully and start reading and living it. Start finding some period of your day, even if it's just for 10 minutes, to read one great teacher or one great master or one great mystic. So,
and I found too that at different parts of my life, some things resonate with me differently.
Yes.
So it could be just where you are at in your own journey as far as what's going to resonate with you.
Yes. I'm loving reading and listening to Glennon Doyle today to talk about a modern day teacher who's really profound. Lately I've been really doing a lot of work on boundaries, and I listened to her speak, actually had her come speak here at Lynn University here in Boca. And her definition and her idea of how she has boundaries in her life, and she thinks of herself in this little island, and she's got a drawbridge, and she puts the drawbridge down when she wants people to come over. And that whole idea really resonated with me, because I think I get that question a lot about boundaries and what do you do about toxic people in your life, and what do you do if you have family members that are constantly causing you suffering and negativity. And so that idea of, I look at teachers and what are they practicing and what can they share that helps me form and cultivate my own sense of what do I need to do in my life. And I hope that you're hearing from me that I trust myself so completely, which is so odd of a little girl who didn't even think that she mattered, that just keep finding teachers that speak to you and keep really strengthening that relationship with yourself, so that you can see, oh, I heard this from Glennon Doyle about boundaries. I can't imagine that idea of living on an island, having a moat and putting the drawbridge down, but I can imagine that I have the power to be able to decide what toxic people am I going to allow into my life. And that, wow, I have the power to limit those conversations. And I can maybe spend 5 minutes talking to a family member who is very dysfunctional and toxic, and that's okay. I don't have to feel guilty. So, yeah, I love what you said. Finding you're different in every single aspect of your day and of your life, and different periods or different seasons of your life, and people come and go, and you're meant to be hearing different teachers at different times, and finding one that touches your heart deeply and go after them. Go read them, go some time with them. And it doesn't mean you have to be their best friend and go live with them. What I mean is really invite them into your heart and read, and you can become their friend without ever meeting them.
Learning from their distilled experience, life experience.
Most of my teachers I've never met. St. Augustine in Confession, he says, I can tell my hand what to do. I can tell my hand to pick something up. I can tell my hand what to do. And I tell my mind what to think. When I read that back in 1989, profound. Whoa, that is so true. So just little things like that, I think, will have a profound impact if you open yourself up to reading a teacher that initially touches your heart.
Okay, so one thing that I deal with, the internal suffering of me is one thing. Also, the suffering that goes on in the world. There's a lot of it. And as far as like the women workers in Bangladesh, Chinese workers, even the silent suffering of animals in slaughterhouses. How do you resolve that suffering within yourself? Because I went on a kick where I was like, not buying anything from China, not buying anything from Bangladesh. I'm a vegetarian. And then I quickly realized, like, oh, this is kind of hard. Like, I'm going to be eliminating everything out of my life, because it's just there. There's so much suffering everywhere. Number one, I know, you started, or you ran a charity in Florida for a long time. Peaceful Mind, Peaceful Life is a nonprofit. So these are things that you actively think about and actively tackle. How do you go about dealing with knowing that it's out there?
This is a fabulous interview, by the way, Brad. I love your questions.
Thank you.
You are outstanding.
Thank you very much.
I hear that a lot. Let me back up first, though, and say that I sold my McDonald's restaurants. I got remarried. My first husband and I were divorced, and I got remarried in 1992 and sold my restaurants in 1998. And then I went on a retreat. I've been on hundreds of retreats. It's what I do. Went on a retreat, and I had no idea that it was a vegetarian retreat. I mean, I own McDonald's restaurants, for goodness sake, right?
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea it was a vegetarian retreat. And as I said, I'm a good student and loved the teacher, loved what was happening at the retreat, and left that retreat and never ate meat again. So I've been vegetarian since 1998. And yes, people ask me, is it because of your bulimia? Is it because you want to stay thin? Is it because of all that? Because even in 1998, being a vegetarian was not that common, especially here in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure where you are, but Florida is behind the times in all of these kinds of things.
Oh, when I go to Thanksgiving with my family in Tennessee, I typically eat rolls.
Yeah.
Rolls and corn. Like, even the green bean has meat in it.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. Even when we go to dinner here, this is 2018, and we go to with friends to their club, and they'll say, oh, we have cauliflower soup or we have tomato soup. And I'll say, oh, fantastic. Is it vegetarian? Yeah. And I said, well, would you just check with the chef just to see what the base is? And every single time it's a chicken stock base or it's a this base. And they go, we're so sorry. And I'm thinking, this is 2018. You can't make one soup that doesn't have a chicken stock. Yeah. So mine is an animal thing, but it's certainly it's not, I'm not trying to impose it upon people, but it is an animal thing. So I think it affects me deeply. Just as you said about all of the things that are happening. I am a firm believer in, when I talk about becoming strong and powerful within yourself, it's so easy to take your practice and try to change the world with it. Most of the retreats I teach and most of the workshops I teach, most of the people want to have a similar question as yours, but then they also want to change the people in their family and the people around them and make them better people and make everything better. And I'm vegetarian, so everybody around me should eat. And I just don't believe in that. I'm a really strong believer that the stronger that I am within myself, practicing as authentically as I can within myself. I lost my temper with my husband today, actually, this morning. Not in a bad, the way I was talking was very strong and probably not as kind, maybe. I had very strong beliefs. And I walked out of the room, and he was fine. I walked out of the room and I thought, I don't want him to feel like this was an attack. So I went back and I said, I don't think that came out right. He didn't know what I was talking about. He goes, it's fine. What do you mean? So I'm so aware not to be self-indulgent, but to always be cognizant of who I am and how I want to live my life. So I think when you're that aware of who you want to be, I believe strongly that I will have an impact on the rest of the world, that me practicing to the best of my ability every single day affects all of the people around me. So when it comes to the worldwide situations, I have a mantra practice, and I wrote about it heavily in the book because it's one of my favorite practices in my life that I do. I have a mantra practice where I will have a mantra that I've been using for decades, and I use that mantra as sort of a prayer or sort of a healing or a relieving of suffering to people. So I will write my mantra every single day for something that's happening in the world. When we had the earthquakes, the hurricanes that were happening in Texas and the hurricane that happened here in South Florida last year, I would write my mantra before I would sleep that the people would get what they needed, so that their suffering could be relieved. I'm big into trying to relieve the suffering of another human being every single day, which was a teaching from Thich Nhat Hanh. So I believe my power comes in my writing and doing everything that I can possibly do. All that being said, there is an activist inside of me that has started to rear its head in the past couple of years. I mean, I am a product of the 60s. I am very strong inside of me of human rights, social rights, women's rights, civil rights. All of that matters a great deal to me. So when the Parkland shootings happened, I said to myself, this is where you step in, Barb. This is, you've done everything that you can do. You live your life fully and authentically, and you can't change the world by going to Africa and going to China. And by the way, I try never to buy anything from China. I think that's probably a Dalai Lama thing of mine.
Yeah.
He is one of my biggest teachers.
I just watched a documentary on the plight of the Tibetans. So that's really horrible too, that I never knew about.
Yeah, it's horrible. So I do those, you do those little things, but it's not, I just believe me doing it is enough, because I don't want to, because I think if I try to change the world with it, it becomes too much of the ego starts getting in the way of it. And I just feel like it becomes a little bit less powerful. But Parkland, so I have stepped in there, and I have am doing some work over there and looking at what can I do to help support the voices around social activism, social change, all of the things that Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., Thomas Merton, the Dalai Lama, Nelson Mandela, those are my favorite teachers of all time. They have really molded me the most in terms of my, not only my inner practice, big time Gandhi, of course, but my social practice, my social activism and the feeling that we are all one and that it matters how we live our lives and everything we do makes a difference. So I have, come out against, obviously, with the whole gun control thing, and just the idea that these students, they are amazing human beings and they need to be supported and lifted up, and whatever I can do spiritually, financially, social media wise, I'm going to do. So I think what I'm trying to say in this long answer is being open to where you are meant to be called in, and you will be called in and you will know.
It's interesting to me because Parkland resonated with me as well in the same way. Can you tell me about, I guess, how you felt about Parkland when it happened? What were the emotions that spurred you into action that basically said, now I need to act?
So Parkland, when I first moved to Florida in 1980, we owned our restaurants in Michigan first, and we sold those and moved to Florida. We moved to Coral Springs, there was no Parkland. Coral Springs was just basically getting started. And so Parkland came on the scene several years later. My husband at the time and I got divorced. My daughter and I moved. My daughter and I stayed in the house in Coral Springs. My husband moved to Parkland. So Michelle, my daughter, that was her neighborhood. I mean, this was our community. This was our life. Now, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas wasn't built yet. It was built a little bit later on, but this was our community. And, I remember obviously all the other shootings that have happened across the country. I mean, in the world, obviously.
Sandy Hook.
All of Sandy Hook. I thought for sure, all those other ones. Columbine. I'm a big skier, so I've gone to Colorado a lot in my life. All of those touched me deeply, but there was something about looking at my phone, seeing the alert that there was a shooting in Parkland. My heart stopped. Now I can hardly, there was a shooting in Parkland, and to see how many kids were killed and what all had happened. And I just inside of me knew, wow, I have to do something. So I'd say be open, receptive, just allow your heart to be open and not try to push, we can't make things happen. We can do all of the work that we need to do to allow the things to unfold and happen. And they unfold and happen in big ways. So I said, and I remember texting my daughter, she lives in New York. She's moving back to Florida next month. But I remember texting her and she goes, Mom, what are we going to do? And in that moment, at first, I was so numb. I said, I don't know what you mean. She goes, what do you mean you don't know what I mean? She's like, you know what I mean. And I said, I know, we have to do something. And Glennon Doyle had done a post on her Instagram that came up on my feed. See, things come up that it came up on my feed that I just loved with Everytown and with Moms on Demand and that. And so I reposted it. And I really had never stuck my foot into some of those controversial things because my whole life has been about meditation, mindfulness, and living your best life. And it really wasn't about all the social things necessarily. Yes, I'm a vegetarian. Yes, I am a huge Dalai Lama fan. And when you know me really personally, you know that about me. But my whole message is wanting to get the whole world to come around to peace and love and understanding and self-acceptance. So I reposted hers and took some flack from it because people didn't, well, what about, we need our guns, we need all of this stuff, which didn't matter. But I remember my daughter texted me back, wow, Mom, you're serious. We're stepping in. Yeah, she was so excited because she's been wanting to step in for years. So, and we worked together. She found a piece of my peace life with me. So I think it touched me deeply. And what it's going to look like, what work I'm going to actually be doing, I'm not certain. I'm working now with the local university, Florida Atlantic University, and Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, and trying to look at my whole thing is I want to support them in their mission and their cause. I don't want to tell them what to do. I want to support their desires and their wishes. And my biggest source of support can be sustainment and nourishment and taking care of themselves, and because this is a long run, whatever it is they're trying to do, gun safety, school safety, gun control, whatever it is. There's so many components that are happening over there. They're in it for the long haul, and they're going to meet a lot of resistance. And this is my forte. I mean, I look at Martin Luther King. I look at Gandhi. Look at Nelson Mandela. So this is my expertise. This is my wheelhouse. So I want to support them in any way that I can, that they can be successful in the long haul of sustaining and really coming out whole and complete, and knowing that they have given it their all in a very mindful, strong way.
And you're the wise woman, giving the counsel, the wisdom, and your support. Parkland. Oh man, me and my wife had a conversation about Parkland, and like I said, I grew up in Tennessee, so guns are it's not even a controversial topic in my family, especially. It's set in stone. Like, you're not going to take my guns. And I thought, when the NRA released a statement, and then people are talking about Parkland and about gun control, and the kids were the ones driving things forward, I felt shame as an adult. I felt ashamed that one kid killed a lot of other kids, and the adults' gut reaction is, you're not going to take away my guns. That's our children. Those were our kids that we're supposed to take care of. And we're so concerned about people taking away our guns that we make them take care of themselves. So I felt angry at the situation, at people's reaction. But I still feel ashamed that, the kids are forced to take care of themselves. And that's not right to me. I have 2 little daughters, and no matter what I believed, if you can empathize with a parent that has lost their kid to gun violence, I believe people's opinion would change on a dime. And that night, because I had never done this before, I read about Sandy Hook, and I looked at the pictures, and I couldn't. You can't not have a reaction looking at the children, because I see my daughters in those pictures being dropped off for school and getting mown down. And that was very powerful for me. And that was, I guess, going to ask you a question in a few minutes, but this is one thing for me that it's a change of belief for me. It just looking at the results, the things that our gun laws have allowed to happen. Like I said, I feel ashamed that it did happen, even though obviously I can't wave a magic wand and change it. But I do feel like it's all of our responsibilities to do better and do a better job of making sure that it doesn't happen again. Because, all of the school shootings, Sandy Hook, they should have been wake-up calls that, we need to do a better job.
Brad, this is so important because we just come full circle. This is why meditation and mindfulness is so key. People take the humanity out of it. You are one with, and you are fully embracing of humanity. So you can't not look at a child in Syria, or the Parkland victims, or the Sandy Hook, or Columbine, or Paris, or Africa. We could go on and on and on. You can't not look at children, human beings, and not be touched by it, because you're connected with, and you're one with humanity. And what happens, and this is what I believe so strongly, and when you sit in meditation, I said, you get that feeling that all is well, but don't break faith with that awakened heart that you've discovered. This is what happens in life. I think you're exactly right. There's not a human being on the planet that doesn't look at a little child in Syria or a little child from Sandy Hook, and their first reaction is, oh my God, you know, and I feel it right now, just saying it to you, you feel it. But then you check it up into the mind. We haven't done that, but you check it up into the mind, and the mind says, yeah, but I got to protect myself. Yeah, this is sad. This is a tragedy, but I got to protect myself. Or this doesn't mean that, this doesn't mean that. And then they start rationalizing, and well, this, if we don't have God, or whatever it is, it's any situation. We check it up into the mind and we lose the connection of the humanity. We lose the heart connection. So the mind is running amok without the heart being included. And one of my greatest passions about my work is live with your heart and your mind connected. This is what sitting with yourself and having a relationship with yourself is. The heart and the mind are connected. So we're not getting rid of the mind. We're not pretending like the heart doesn't matter. We're joining forces and allowing our lives to be led with a unified alignment of heart and mind. And I think that's what happens. The mind takes over fully, and all these fears and all of these things, as we said earlier in this conversation, that aren't real.
The cognitive dissonance too. We separate ourselves from the situation. Like, if anybody listening out there, I challenge you to look up the victims, look at their pictures, and think about the outward effects, all of the little threads that were affected by just a horrible, horrible, horrible event. And it's really hard not to be affected. Like I said, I'm a vegetarian. I remember the moment that I became a vegetarian because, I mean, like I said, there's meat in the green peas, for God's sake, at Thanksgiving, you know? My family, I've told them probably 10 times, they don't even remember. Like, you know, it's like it doesn't even enter their brain. But my wife and I were walking. We were in Tennessee, in Chattanooga, downtown, and she's been a vegetarian for longer than me. And we were just having a talk about the animals. And I asked myself a question. I said, could I take the life of a sentient animal, myself, a sentient being, so that I could eat a hamburger for dinner? And the answer was resounding no. I can't do that myself. I can't pull the trigger. It felt hypocritical of me to continue eating these animals if I couldn't pull the trigger myself. And, you know, it's like just putting it out of sight, out of mind. That's somebody else's business. They'll take care of it. You know, it gets delivered, it gets made into a hamburger at McDonald's and served to me. When I came to that conclusion, and I'm not saying everybody should be a vegetarian, but this was what I put on myself, and I asked myself that question, and I came to the realization, no, I can't do it. And then I thought, well, that's it. If I can't do it, then I won't do it.
And so do you see what you just said, Brad, that's so important in this conversation is you are checking in with yourself. You are asking yourself questions. You are getting to know yourself. You're getting to understand you, and you're going to live your life and make choices based on who you are. This is what really, I'm so excited. This is what a practice, this is what living our lives fully means. It doesn't mean that everyone has to become a vegetarian, because many people can ask themselves that same question and say, sure. And this is not about converting everyone to our own way of thinking. It's about finding who you are. How do you want to live your life, and live it on purpose, as Dolly Parton used to say from your neck of the woods there. Find out who you are and live your life on purpose. Ask yourself questions. I say so often, I am a scientist. My life is a laboratory. I ask myself questions all day long. Barb, how do you feel about this? And you and I are really on the same page in that. When I went on that retreat in 1998 that was vegetarian, it didn't even register with me. Okay, it's vegetarian, so what? I won't eat meat and I'll go home and eat meat. No, we went on a walk. This was in the hills of Northern California. We went on a walk, a friend of mine that I had met there, and there was a whole farm of a bunch of cows, and we just stood there. And 2 cows started walking up to us. We're behind the fence. And I stuck my hand out in between the links of the fence, and it put its chin in my hand. And in that moment, I didn't even have to ask myself anything. It was like we connected. So it's so important to ask yourself, what do you believe? What do you want? Who are you? I think that's the disconnect. And I think when you start understanding who you are and asking questions, I think it's going to answer what you were saying earlier, that we tend to separate. We're not so connected because we can't really deal with the feelings of it, or it's too hard, or it's too painful, or it's going to make us change. Most of the time it's going to make us change something, and we don't really want to go there. But if you can just be at least open to it a little bit and just start the little discovery of who are you, and make your life this beautiful experiment of, what do I really want? Because I did a lot of work. One of my best friends, as you said, I do a lot of nonprofit work, and my work with Peace of Mind, Peaceful Life in particular, dear friend of mine, who's worked with me all the way up until I wrote the book, and she died. The dedication of the book is to Mary. She was working with hospice patients, and I'll never forget her coming to me one day. We were talking, and she said, Barb, do you know what the number one regret of the dying is? She said, it's I didn't live the life that I wanted to live. And it just really touched me. I thought, can you imagine, wow, what is the life that I want to live? Who am I? Those are all the big questions that we ask. But I think it's so important because then you don't separate from yourself. We separate from other people because we don't want to look at the pain of separating from ourselves. We don't want to realize we already are separating from ourselves because we're not really sure who we are. And I think it's so true what you said. We did a project with Syria, with the children there, and I had some real backlash from people. Well, what about the kids in the United States? You can't help them. So I think it is so true to try to help people come together, that I feel all children are my children, but many people aren't there. So how can we help people little by little start to open up just a little bit to the humanity of all of us? Hopefully, I think this podcast is going to do it.
I hope so.
I think so.
I have a couple of thoughts about what you just said. Firstly, being somebody that's kind of driven by data and analysis, I think that, if you do something for the Syrian children, there's some percentage of the population will give you backlash about not doing it for the U.S. children. And if you do it for the U.S. children, there's some percentage of the population that's going to give you backlash for not helping the Syrian kids. So it's like a catch-22. And the other thing is authenticity, being authentic to yourself and how important that is. So I do stuff online. Writing sales copy is one of a skill that's necessary to learn. And I'm not so good at it. And I remember making a sales page about living authentically to who you are. And I submitted it to somebody for like a teardown, basically, to give me feedback. Mm. And that person just ripped me a new one. That it was, who wants to be authentic? Nobody wants to be authentic. They were saying, more specific things. How can I be sexier? How can I lose weight? How can I blah, blah, blah? And I just thought, isn't that all there is? Living a life that's authentic to you, that you feel comfortable with? I mean, what higher goal is there than that? I don't want to live a life and be old, 75, 80 years old, and think, wow, why wasn't I me? And my idea of me actually is probably wrong to everybody else's perception of me. Why didn't I live within my ideal of me throughout my life? And it's hard. I was telling my wife just the other day, people are dressing up and, they have a specific style and you think that's them, right? And I wear t-shirts and jeans and I'm like, I don't really know what my style is. I don't have something. I just try to be sort of plain and go through life like that. But the authenticity it's a struggle, and it's something that you have to commit to, and it's going to equal change of outside actions that come from a change of the inside. Okay, so I guess we'll ask a few more questions and then wrap up. We're getting to our 2-hour mark. And I feel like if we keep talking, it will just go on all day. So tactically, you get a lot done.
what are some tools that you use today or within the last 5 years on a daily basis that you can't live without? Because there's so many tools to choose from. What are the ones you specifically use?
So first thing is meditation, for sure. I mean, I start my day with meditation. I believe strongly. People say, can we do it later? Yes, of course. No one is the boss of you. You're the boss of yourself. My daughter at 5 years old told me, Mom, you're not the boss of me. But okay, so I've used that ever since. So you're the boss of you. But I think starting off the day with meditation sets the tone for the whole day. You get connected to you. You get that sense of groundedness, of strength, of power, of certainty. You understand what you're doing, and you step into the day with all the unpredictability out there. So that's key, number one. The second strong one is I have developed as a result of my meditation practice, but I think also as a result of my inquiry and my fascination with discovering who I am and what do I like and what do I want. I have a very strong intuition. I studied with several teachers that said everybody's intuitive, because I used to think I wasn't. Everyone's intuitive. You just have to develop it. You have to care about it and ask yourself. So I have a very strong sense of intuition. So I don't say yes to things that aren't something that I really want to do. Like I used to do that all the time. Say yes when I wish I'd said no. How often do we say yes to something? And many times we're regretful or we're angry or we're frustrated. Because saying yes to something that you don't want to do not only makes you angry and irritated, it drains your energy. So tool number 2 is really look at what drains your energy and really recognize that you only have so much to give. You only have so much energy. We are not have infinite supply of energy. We must look at where we're expending our time and our effort. And so say no to the things that don't really light you up and that aren't anything that you want to do, because it's going to take you away from where you want to go.
And you may flake on a responsibility that you say yes to that you don't want to, and then you feel guilt about flaking. So it not only lasts up till the moment, but then extends beyond the moment.
Yes. It's taken your energy for days. Yes. Well, also you're not really all present either. I'm all about being present, obviously, and being in the moment and giving people my all attention. If I say yes and I really wish I'd said no, I'm at the event or at the lunch or at the whatever it is I'm doing, thinking, what am I doing here? Why did I say yes to this?
Running out the clock.
They don't have me anyway. Yes, running out the clock. I think the third thing is really taking self-care, having some real self-care practices. I will take a nap often. By nap, I mean I'll just lie down and close my eyes for 10 minutes. There is an amazing rejuvenation that happens. So you can't give more than what you have. So to go, which was my whole thing back in the day, was just keep going, keep going, keep going. I recognize now, certainly I'm sure age has something to do with that, but I look back and I think, wow, as a younger person, if I really took better care of myself, saying no when I wanted to say no, using some self-care practices of, maybe not being on the phone for a couple of hours and just really being without that external noise in my face. It is amazing. It is amazing what happens for you. How much more nourished, how much more resilience you have, how much more vibrancy you have. And that equates into more success. It equates into more happiness. So I do that often.
I'll say too, you mentioned the phone, and you also mentioned external forces, making your moat and your drawbridge that brings stress to your life. A lot of times, I'm not going to name any names, but I'll get a phone call, and I know that if I answer the phone, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to get mad at the end of it and hang up, and then I'm just going to be angry for like another hour. And you don't have to opt in to those phone calls. You can not answer them. If it's text messages that bug you, you can opt out of that too. Put it on ignore so that you don't have a response to that particular situation, because those things are, and typically if you're getting a text message, it's from somebody you know well, so you have an intimate relationship with them, and they're seen 100% of the time. So it's almost like you can't avoid them, but you can flag it to turn off notifications and opt out, because that's certainly something that can hurt you.
Well, I think you're right. And that's another tool is I limit the amount of external news, opinions, forces that I will have come into my life. I want to know why people say to me, oh, you can't be you can't stick your head in the sand and not know what's happening in the world. And I said, of course, I want to know what's happening. That's very, very important to me. But I don't need to know every single person's opinion of what's happening in the world. And we do that. We will listen to every news station or read a paper, or read a blog, or read whatever online. We're constantly being bombarded with other people's opinions about what's actually happening.
And then the 400 comments after an article, people's opinion about the opinion.
We're taking in too many other people's opinions and not realizing how much it's affecting us. It's really affecting our moods, our mind, our energy, everything. It affects us greatly. And I'd say the last tool would be, I end the day, and it's a part of my practice, I end the day leaving everything that happened in this day in the day. I have a reflection activity at the end of the day. I go through the day kind of looking at it like a movie. What went well? What didn't go so well? What can I learn here? What could I do differently tomorrow? I truly have that intention and have that practice of that this day is over. I can't do anything while I'm getting ready to go to sleep about what happened. Can't change it. Can't do anything. Let me go to sleep, knowing that tomorrow is a new day, if I'm granted the grace of having a new day. And this practice became very prominent in my life. I practiced it a little bit over the years, but it's really become prominent as a result of two situations. One, I went on a service project with my daughter about 12 years ago in Mexico, and there was a Native American Indian that spoke, and he was alive. His grandmother, his mother, his grandmother, his great-grand, they were all alive. They were like one great-grandmother was like 125 years old. And one of the kids on the project said, how do you account that you live so long? And he said, we don't drink soda. And when the day is over, the day is over. And I remember the little boy said, what do you mean? And he said, we only have this day and this moment. And when it's over, it's over. And then the second thing, my first husband, who I said we were divorced, in 2007, he went to sleep and didn't wake up. It was very traumatic for my daughter, and we were friends, and big impact. And it affirmed for me in the practice that I was already doing kind of halfway that we don't know if we're going to wake up tomorrow. We really don't know. So it infused in me the idea of truly trying to live every moment during the day, but most importantly, if I've done my best during the day, to not go to sleep with regrets or with anger or with the idea that I can fix it right there while I'm going to sleep, that I can keep extending this day into the whole night. No, it's over. The day's over. Go to sleep with some kind of making peace with the day.
So let the baggage go and then do your best the next day. That's one of the 4 agreements, right? Do your best.
Do your best.
I'm going to end on one question. It's a hard one. So sorry in advance. And we've touched on it some throughout our conversation organically, but throughout the course of your life, have you ever, and I'm going to try to limit this to make it even harder for you, because I know you can handle it.
Right.
In the last 5 years or so, is there anything that you staunchly believed only to reverse course? And if so, what led to that change?
Wow, that is a hard question. Well, certainly my vegetarianism, if you go 20 years, the idea that none of that really mattered, and I owned McDonald's restaurants and never really ever gave a thought to it. And as you said earlier, your family, my family, to the day both my mother and father died, and even my siblings today don't really remember it or understand it. You're still doing that? What does that mean? You were raised on all of this. So it's such a shift for me. And I think it's a monumental shift for them. They can't even wrap their head around it to this day, 20 years later. I honestly, Brad, don't think there is anything in the recent years that I've staunchly believed, because I've spent my life.
Well, maybe an assumption, maybe an assumption you had that changed direction, I guess. And it could even be like an unconscious assumption. Like, for instance, Parkland for me was an unconscious assumption. And when I thought about it, I went, whoa, that's not right.
Yes, that is, I love the way you rephrase this. Yes. So when you're practicing meditation and mindfulness, and it is a given that when you practice meditation, you start to get the deep knowing that we are all connected. Just like the aspen trees, there's one root system, and that's how they all survive with that one root system. I believe strongly we are all connected as one human being race. Not even human being, all beings, all sentient beings. That being said, I still had my opinions about people, and there are some bad people out there, and I can't possibly be connected to those bad people. Or there are some people that have ideas and the things that they want to do, like a Hitler, let's say, or like someone who's very, you can't even imagine that you could actually be connected to that type of a person. I would say over the past 5, 6, 7 years, and even into today, looking at the world the way that it is, looking at our own country the way that it is, I can be in conversations with anyone, and I can be in conversations with myself and know deeply that even the horrific actions or opinions or thoughts or words of people, I can have a kind, nice thing to say about that person and say, but that isn't really who that person is. I can be in a conversation and have a very good conversation with someone who is completely opposed to my thinking, my way of living, my thought process, and we can have a really good conversation and not at all be on the same page, but have deep respect for each other. And I'm not sure that I would have been that comfortable back in the day. I would have tried to avoid those kinds of conversations because it would ruffle my feathers too much inside. It would make me too uncomfortable. I'd get too angry or too worked up. I'm not saying that I'm not passionate about the things that I believe in and that I don't get worked up. I'll hear something, I'll think, oh my God, that is just not okay. That is just not okay. Please let that not happen, or that can't happen. But it doesn't make me want to attack the person.
How do you go about seeing or using your intuition, the good in somebody that, for all intents and purposes, you don't find it on the surface?
Because I believe strongly in this deep sense of unity and oneness, I want us to all be, peaceful mind, peaceful life. Peace is a massive, not lost on me that I grew up in an unpredictable, chaotic household. So peace is really huge for me because that's my deepest desire. So I think it's important to have, what is your highest ideal in life? My highest ideal in life is that all beings come together in some sense of unity, in some sense of understanding. I want us all to understand each other, not agree. I want us to understand each other. So I look at, every time somebody says something that totally rattles me to the core, I try to understand where they're coming from. How can they have that belief? How can they say what they just said? What must have happened, or what is going on inside of them that they believe that? So it's a sense of trying to understand instead of condemn, criticize, or complain about. I want to understand. I want to understand where you're coming from. And in that understanding, I'm hoping that we can find common ground. And then in the common ground, we could actually affect change.
And that's such a powerful belief, and generates a lot of good in the world. And when you get down to it, I think that belief and taking those actions are what lead to change at the end of the day. It reminds me of, I watched a documentary on a guy, his name's Daryl something. I can't remember his last name, but he's a black guy, and he goes out of his way to communicate and befriend open dialogue with members of the KKK.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Down south there.
Yeah.
In Carolina, yeah.
And whenever, he makes friends with them, like eventually it leads up to he gets their robes, right? And he keeps their robes. And I thought, it just struck me as just this powerful one-on-one connection with somebody else. It's like in the loving kindness meditation, when you think about a person on the street, just a neutral person, and try to find loving kindness for a neutral person that you may see, whether it's a server at a restaurant, or, we have homeless people that are near us that we drive past regularly and see them. And then when you try to have loving kindness for people that have created turmoil in your life, that's really hard for me. It's a really hard struggle in my mind for me to deal with. And that guy, I mean, I think he had some 40 something robes he collected at the end of the documentary. And he was having a conversation with somebody and they were like, how many lives have you changed? And he's like, well, I have 40 something robes. And they're like, 40 people, that's nothing.
Yeah.
And I thought if everybody reaches 40 people, the world changes. 40 people is way more than pulling his own weight. And that's not like a small change shift in somebody either. Like that's changing them to the core of how they were raised, who they are as far as being racist. And, that was just very powerful, very inspiring.
I am all about change and understand peaceful mind, peaceful life. The whole genesis of that is in my meditation. I had the Dalai Lama and Chairman Mao, and I'm brokering peace between the Dalai Lama and Chairman Mao. And I also had it in a dream. And I said to myself, I can't do this. And a voice said, not only can you do this, you must do this. So I think so I've been born to come into two sides. There's different ways of looking at things, and how can we come to common ground and understanding? How can we actually truly, really listen to each other and understand? And I think what this Daryl is doing, he comes into it with trying to understand, and he walks out of it affecting change, affecting unity, affecting, wow, we are one human race. Wow, I do understand now that this is hurting you, or I do understand where you're coming from. Let's try to find a way to really come together. So I am all about change. Change is hard though. People get scared and are afraid. But I think if you come at it with understanding, it has a shot.
Little 14-year-old Barb trying to be invisible, now facilitating, changing, the deep roots of people. It's very inspiring. Barb, love this conversation. Incredible. One last thing before we go, if people want to find you, where can they find you?
Yes, peacefulmindpeacefullife.org, and Barb Schmidt on Instagram, Facebook, Peaceful Barb on Instagram, but peacefulmindpeacefullife.org. And
the practice book.
And oh yeah. I'm not very good at selling myself.
Yeah, me neither.
No, you and I are definitely on the same page. Yes, my book, The Practice, Simple Tools for Managing Stress, Finding Inner Peace, and Uncovering Happiness.
And you have a new book coming out soon, right? You said?
I do. 2019, yes.
Oh, nice. I will.
This has been a joy. I have loved every minute of speaking with you and getting to know you better, and really enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah.
Very nice.
I did too. Thank you very much. I'm very grateful, and yeah, this is amazing conversation. I loved it every second.
I look forward to hearing more. Thank you.